and welcome to a bonus episode of The Rabbit Hole. Today we have a special guest. Nicolo is the host of Shadow Kingdom, God's Banker, where they talk about the Vatican Bank that has become a criminal money laundering machine. This is like a crazy story. The episodes just launched. They launched 2 episodes March 17th, and you get another episode every single week after that, much like my podcast. And we are so fortunate to get to talk about what the Vatican is actually doing with the money that they receive. So let's welcome him. Hi, Nicolo. Thank you so much for coming on The Rabbit Hole. I'm so excited to talk about this. This is going to be crazy.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
So let's start with the Vatican's bank because I didn't even know the Vatican had a bank.
Yes. Yeah, it's a little known and you wouldn't think about it intuitively, but the Vatican has its own separate bank and has had its bank for a very long time, and it's called the Institute for Religious Works. In Italian the initials are IOR, and it's in a
Okay.
tower. Believe it's the Nicholas V Tower. So if you go into the Vatican, it has St. Peter's with that dome that you might have seen in photos. It has
Mhm.
a window where the Pope comes out and does his speeches. But off to the side, there's a medieval tower. Looks like a tower
Ooh.
that you see in a Disney movie. And in that tower, circular tower, were and I believe are the offices of the Institute of Religious Works, a bank that it belongs to the Vatican that has one shareholder, that is the Pope, and it was born in theory just for priests and nuns, but
Okay.
inevitably carried and then had a different kind of mandate slowly but steadily. But that's what it looks like. It's in this tower. It's called the
It
Nicholas V Tower.
it makes me think of like a Harry Potter tower, the way you're explaining it.
Yes. No, yeah. I think well the Vatican is very Hogwarts-esque in
It
its
is,
because
yeah.
it's kind of magic, it's mysterious, it's the architecture is kind of awe-inspiring.
And there's lots of secrets I feel like hidden inside.
Lots of secrets hidden inside. Um and yeah, the story takes place. Yeah, Harry Potter is a interesting. It's a good analogy. I'm going to think of it as Hogwarts going forward. But anyway, as any big institution, it's got to have and keep and safeguard money, right?
Yeah. I guess like who else would take care of their money? Just like
Right?
a bank in Italy?
A bank in Italy, but you could. But the interesting thing that the Vatican figured out is that they're their own country. And I was born in Rome, not far away from the Vatican. So if I were to walk from where I lived when I was a little boy to the Vatican, I would see what is like basically the equivalent of a very, very, very small U.S. town, like the
Okay.
smallest town. That's about as big as it is. Picture the smallest town you've ever seen with
I've
the
been to
smallest.
pretty small towns.
You've been to some pretty small towns. I've too. And that's how big the Vatican is. And it's in the heart of Rome, which is
Wait, the
Italy.
whole Vatican is the size of a small town?
The whole Vatican is the size of a small
Oh my
town.
gosh.
The Vatican is very small and it's in the heart of Rome. And the cool thing is that it is its own country. So
Interesting.
so if you are walking in by the Colosseum, you're in
Hmm.
Italy, you're in Rome, you're in the European Union. Um, you are if you run over somebody, you get the Italian police arrests you. You go to a European court. You have
Hmm.
to pay Italian taxes. Yada yada yada. If you cross into the Vatican, like you look over at St. Peter's and you walk a couple moments down the cobblestone street and you head into the Vatican, you are now in a different state. It's like if you cross the border from Mexico to the United
Interesting.
States, totally different country, totally different country. And so the
I
Vatican,
didn't know that.
it's an interesting thing, and it's not people don't often know that. And within the Vatican, it is all the rights and duties that you would have of a separate country. And the Vatican Bank sits within that little tiny town. And so it is not responsible to Italian regulators or police. And so at the time, it didn't need to undergo any or be under the vigilance of any banking institution. So it
Right.
could just do. What am I trying to say? It has a bank in the Vatican, so it can do whatever it wants without people poking and looking inside.
So did they create its own like state, its own country because of the religious aspect of it? I don't know how to phrase that the way I was talking.
Yeah, no, I get it. The Vatican was um, it's it had this enormous amount of land for much of Italian history. It was kind of the middle of Italy. It occupied what were called the Papal States,
Hmm.
just the states of the Pope, and it exercised the power of a state, and then slowly but steadily it got smaller and smaller and smaller as Italy unified and became a country. It till the point where it was basically just kind of a little neighborhood. I should say
Okay.
the Vatican is basically the size of a neighborhood.
Okay, okay.
And that is the heart of the Catholic Church, and where it has its the equivalent of its president in a sense, which is the Pope, and it has its bank, which is like the banking institutions in the U.S. It has like its Federal Reserve,
Hmm.
and the Treasury, all the things that kind of the U.S. has in a way have their analog in the Vatican.
So how did the Vatican come to have this like I don't like how did it even come about that there was shady happenings happening inside the bank?
That's a good question. I think where there is money, there is often mischief,
That's
unless,
true. Yeah, that's
right?
true.
Even even in these settings where you have supposedly very saintly people, I think the Vatican started to have, uh, it's a good question. How many followers did it have at the time of my story? I know now it's around a billion. There are a billion Catholics.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, there's a lot of
so
Catholics.
I'd say maybe, hundreds and hundreds of millions. And they would give, if you've ever been to a Catholic mass or a church, when you're somewhere halfway through the mass, people pass around a basket,
Yeah.
and it's, you put $1, $2, whatever. And those are donations that you make to the church. And if you have churches all over the world, every Sunday, putting money into the basket, that money, it starts to add up. And, um, and so the IOR, the Vatican Bank, collects
Mhm.
this money and has to, at a certain point, if it's so much money, what do? Well, you often don't keep money in a bank. You try to invest it. Should we put it in
Yeah.
stocks and bonds? Should we, it's like the equivalent of like Schwab or Robinhood. And
I have a question about this. So you're
yeah.
telling me, like, so all the tithes and offerings that come from all the churches, they have to go to the Vatican Bank. They don't go straight back into that specific church. They all go, or like all the extra money goes
Oh,
to the
that's a good
Vatican.
question. I should say, like, I take everything I say, knowing that I'm not a Vatican historian
Right.
or a financial, kind of expert. Um, I studied a very specific kind of weird small story. So please, listeners, for much of this, I'm not speaking as an expert. So I'll try to stick to the very little bits that I know.
No,
You
I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
you're right. So basically, the Vatican, the Vatican controls a lot of the wealth that comes to the church, and then spreads it back out to the places where it came. But a lot of it remains, as you say. A lot of
Okay.
the donations come from the U.S. and they stay in the U.S.
Right. Okay.
But make no mistake, the Central Vatican Bank has a lot of funds that belong to the Vatican.
I think it makes sense. So like they would use like whatever money that they need for their church and then whatever extra, instead of sending it to like any bank like savings account, they would just send it to the Vatican Bank.
Yeah, there's a million different like strange permutations of this, but yeah, I think of the Vatican Bank as the main kind of financial hub,
That makes sense.
certainly of the Vatican.
Okay. Um,
Um,
so then how did you come to this story?
yeah, so you know, I was born in Rome many years ago, and then I moved to the U.S. when I was 10. So I've have a very strong Italian background, and I vaguely remember people talking about. I remember the name God's Banker.
Right.
I don't know that I knew much about the story, but you remember that name, right? When you hear
Hmm.
somebody, God's Banker. Um,
That's a
and
powerful name. Like to
it's a
be called.
powerful name.
Yeah.
It's a powerful name. Il banchiere di Dio in Italian, the God's banker. So I knew a vague recollection of that. And I had a friend of mine years ago when I was looking for these stories, I had two friends. One friend who encouraged me to look into this mysterious guy called God's Banker, a good friend of mine named George. And following that, a guy named Mario, who said not only that I should look into God's Banker, but I should do a story about it because he, Mario, held the key to this mystery. He was supposed to meet God's Banker the night he died.
Oh man.
And he said, Nicolo, if just listen to me, I've got a story to tell you. God's Banker did not commit suicide. He was killed, and I know because I was supposed to meet him. I knew that he was going to be at place X. He had made all the preparations. What kind of man who wants to kill himself, makes detailed preparations for the next day. And so
Right.
anyway, he told me this mysterious story, and it's how the podcast begins with my friend Mario, who in his wonderful Italian accent tells me a story of a hot June day in 1982 when he chased God's Banker, uh, and uh, and so I thought it was so dramatic and cinematic and mysterious that I said, Mario, can I record you? Can you can I come back and can I think this is worthwhile?
Yeah.
Maybe it'll be an episode. We can submit it somewhere. Maybe it won't be a series, but and he told me, yes, it just so happened that I was a young reporter. I was a young guy in New York City. I was a young Italian. I hadn't been there very long. I was in the big city, and so Italian newspapers knew that they could reach me if there were stories that were relevant in New York. They had their man in New York was Mario, and one day they called him on the phone and they said, Mario, you know about God's Banker? I said, yeah, of course I know about God's Banker, Roberto Calvi. He's missing. He's been missing for a week. Italy's most important banker disappeared, has
Oh man.
disappeared into the night. Nobody knows where he is. All his secrets, everything he knows disappears with him. And all we know is that his bank is crumbling out of the blue. His bank is defaulting and losing a ton of money. We think, Mario, he might be in the Americas. And if you could find traces of him or get some little receipt or find where he is, this would be a massive scoop. And so Mario says, leave it with me.
He's
Leave
like,
it with me.
Roger
So
that. Here we
Roger
go.
that. Roger that.
I was in
So
the
if
Navy, so I say that a lot. People make fun of me.
so Roger that. Mario says Roger that. You're right. And that's how the podcast begins. My friend Mario on the hunt for God's Banker.
And
Um,
he obviously didn't find him because he died.
and he obviously didn't find him because you're right. That Mario knew had the number for Calvi. He had the number for God's Banker's son, who lived in
Okay.
Canada. So Mario picks up the phone, dials the number, phone rings, uh, and the phone rings in Canada, and this housekeeper picks up. She says, "Hello, this is the Calvi residence." And my friend Mario says, "I'd like to speak to Carlo, God's Banker's son."
Yeah.
And the housekeeper says, "Oh, they're not here. The whole family is planning to be in the Bahamas tomorrow. Preparations are made. Son, daughter, wife, they're all flying to Lyford Key, which is this very exclusive part of the Bahamas." And Mario's heart is racing. Mario's like, God's Banker, the fugitive that the whole world wants to know. I got a housekeeper accidentally to spill the beans to tell me that he's going to be in the Bahamas tomorrow. So Mario is completely overwhelmed. He buys a ticket for the Bahamas. He's going to intercept God's Banker, the most notorious fugitive right now on planet Earth. Buys a ticket, goes to his bank, that goes to his place of work in New York before he leaves for the Bahamas, and he says, "Guys, I've got to go. I've got a ticket for to the Bahamas. I just trust me. I got to get out of here." And they say, "Mario, hold on. Have you heard? Have you heard the news?" And it's this it's this telex machine, this old news. It's this thing that spits out paper news, and he rips it, and it says, God's Banker found dead, hanging under a London bridge.
Oh my gosh.
Suicide? Question mark. And so that of course ends Mario's trip to find God's banker. But it is, and I've just recited kind of like word for word the beginning of my podcast. So um,
But it's a
it,
good intro because then people are like, "Ooh, I want to go listen to the rest of
maybe
that."
it's a good intro for if your listeners want to know more. You'll hear basically kind of the story I just told, but it's told much better by my friend Mario, who's like such a charismatic storyteller, and he has a wonderful way of describing that day. And I joke, by the way. I mean, this is a story of a guy who died, so I never want to make it sound like, ha ha ha, this is a funny story. So my friend Mario has a warmth and kind of a lighthearted way of describing it, but it's a serious story, and the guy died, um,
So
and that
why was everyone on the look for God's banker? Like what why was he a fugitive? Who was he running from? The Vatican?
you're right.
Isn't
That's
he the
such a good
banker for
question.
the Vatican?
He was the banker. He was the main one of the main bankers who curated the interests of the Vatican Bank as a long-winded way of saying, like, yes, he was the banker for the Vatican. He was running. He was on the run because, and we know this now, he had sent a letter to the Pope a few days before, a letter that was found later on, and it was a letter that he had written directly to the Pope, who was John Paul II at the time.
Okay.
And he said, Your Holiness, I am abandoned. And I'm summarizing here. This is not
Yeah.
word for word. Your Holiness, I am abandoned by the Vatican, by its institutions. I have done your bidding. I have sent money that you asked me to send across the world. Um, I have sent money to prop regimes that are favorable to you. I have done everything I can to be a man of trust for the Vatican, but now I find myself deserted and abandoned by the same people who I was meant to be protected by. Um, it's a little bit of an ominous note, right?
Right.
Sounds like a little bit like a threat, sounds a little bit like help. Who knows? So
Or a
God's
little both.
banker, a
Yeah.
little bit of both. God's banker, we know that he was the banker for the Vatican, but he was also the president of a very important Italian bank. So like it would be like a JP Morgan or a Goldman Sachs, an American bank. So
Yeah.
he has his day job as the president of that big bank. And on the side, he kind of like deals with the interests of the Vatican Bank.
Okay.
That his day job bank is tanking.
Oh.
It's collapsing. And God's banker, he can't find ways to prop it up. So imagine if, his major bank, I'm trying to think of like an American, if like
Wells
Capital One or
Fargo.
Bank of America, Wells
Yeah.
Fargo,
Chase.
it's tanking. We don't super know why, but God's
Hmm.
banker all of a sudden sends a threatening letter to the Pope, almost as if he's asking, "Help me support my bank." It's almost like you could read it. My bank is failing because I helped you.
Right.
Y'all help me, or I'm gonna spill the beans. That's where the camera stops from what we know from God's banker, and then he disappears into the night. And that's where my
Oh.
friend Mario was trying to look for him. And that's where the podcast begins.
And that's where the conspiracy begins.
And that is where the rabbit hole deepens.
Oh man. So I guess maybe you can't tell me, but have they
Hmm.
decided was it a suicide or was it uh murder for hire? I guess they would probably hire it out. The Pope's not going out there killing people.
No, that would not be wise. That's a great question, and I would say that I put forth a lot of maybe theory is not the right word. I try to put forth proof,
Yeah.
solid proof that it was not a suicide. It was a murder, and I should say, I should say it this way. I began the show convinced it was suicide. I thought the murder
Interesting.
was such, I was like, what a conspiracy theory. What a, no, 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 no. This is a classic case of a conspiracy theory that is just that.
Right. Just a theory.
It's just
And
a
people are just
theory.
like blowing it up. Yeah,
People
absolutely.
are, people are blowing it up. Oh, how silly. People who,
It's a fun story to tell.
it's a fun story to tell.
It's more exciting than a suicide.
more exciting than a suicide, and people are projecting, all these dark, shadowy things that sound great in movies, but anyway, not real.
Right.
So when I met my friend Mario, I was very much going to prove in this series that it was a suicide, and my friend Mario swore it was a murder. My friend Mario was like, "Trust me,
So
I've
you're like,
looked into it."
Mario's the conspiracy theorist, I'm the realist here, and we're gonna work this all out.
Exactly. I was going to be the sane one. I was going to be the one that showed him, no, 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 this conspiracy theory was not for me. And then what actually ended up happening, and I spent a few years on this story.
This was what always happens.
This is what always happens, Danielle. You know. Um, what happened was I found that actually, kind of like almost all the conspiracy aspects of this story were true. Like like every single one of them. And it's not in my nature. I have to tell you, it's not in my nature to be like, I try not to believe when I hear a story like this. Oh, it was, the mafia was working with the Vatican, was working with the CIA, I'm like, there's
Pump the
got to be a
brakes.
simpler explanation, right?
Right.
There's no way this guy was involved with all these different shady actors. But, you know, and it was true. It was true. All these people were connected to God's banker.
I can't wait to listen to every single episode.
I'm
I know
excited
I
for
know
you
that
to
they're not
listen.
all out yet, but I'm ready to like listen to I'm ready to just binge this whole thing.
Okay, so you're ready to binge. So I think by the time this will air, at least four will be out. 4 out of 8.
That's not enough.
That's not
See, I
enough.
don't
I
I
know.
don't know if I can do that. Maybe
You
I have
might
to
not be
wait.
able to do it.
I might have to wait till they're all out. I have to do
Okay.
that sometimes with like Reacher, watching Reacher on I don't know, whatever Prime Video or whatever. I
Yeah,
can't do it 1 week at a time. I don't know how I used to do this when, on regular TV when things would come out. I don't know how I did it.
I
I'm
get
very
it.
much a binger.
I get it. I get it. Yeah, there's things I don't know if you watch the show Severance, or there's all that or White Lotus, or all these shows that come out
Yeah.
once a week.
Yeah.
It's so weird now to see how not used to it you are anymore. Like I'm not used to wait. What do you mean I have to wait till next Sunday? Like what is
Yeah.
this?
Like Game of
1989?
Thrones was doing that. Yeah. And we're like, okay, come on. Like we need. So I didn't watch Game of Thrones at all until everything was out. Like
Wow. Yeah.
years. And everyone's talking about Game of Thrones. I'm like, I'll watch it some other time. And then once it
Yeah.
was all out, I binged the whole thing.
Yeah.
But
I
like,
get it.
I don't know. I'm a crazy person.
Well, I think it's especially with stories like this one, like God's Banker. And by the way, if people are listening, that's what it's called. It's called God's Banker. So if you just type in God's Banker in spot on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you'll
Well, and
find
I'll
it.
link it too in the show notes. That way it's super easy for
Awesome.
everybody to find. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's these stories are they're bingeable because you'll every episode in the podcast that you listen to ends with just this like incredible cliffhanger. So it's like, and by the way, like I didn't try to add cliffhangers just to be cute or whatever gratuitous. It's because they really were there. Like I want to say all I truly tried to do was kind of report all these established facts that are out there.
Hmm.
Like there's two or three things that are new that I report. I try to give some new information, but primarily like this is hard information that was already out there, and all of it sounds like a movie. Like that's
Oh,
why I was
yeah.
obsessed with this story because it all just sounds like a freaking movie. It's a movie. Like I want to see this with it sounds like just an action movie, or it sounds like The Godfather meets like the Terminator slash Rambo slash like Conclave. It's like I don't know. It was all so wild. It was all so wild, and it was a real adventure to look into this.
So you said that you wanted to prove that it was a suicide.
Hmm.
So then my first question, or I guess the question in my head, because obviously you ended up proving that it's not. Um, did you believe in any conspiracy theories leading up to this? Because I find that people that are like so skeptical about the conspiracy, they're like, I don't believe in hardly any conspiracy theories, if any at all. Whereas like other people, they're like, yeah, I believe that like this one's a conspiracy, so this one could be, right? Like they have that like option, that door's cracked a little bit. Or like people like me, I'm like everything's a conspiracy. So like going into this,
Hmm.
I'd be like, yeah, it wasn't a suicide to begin with, but like that's what I do for a living.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a good question. I'm my nature, I don't know why this is, especially after working on this story where everything was true. I tend to be more skeptical. I tend to, and I just, I don't know why, but I guess my nature is to answer your question. I always push it away. I'm like, no, 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 hold on. Where can we find the an answer that we can say that actually it wasn't a conspiracy? It's just that all these guys were really dumb, or this system failed, or I guess I always try to look for that. I'm a lawyer and practiced law for many years, and I think I lawyers are very by the book,
Yeah.
methodical. Show me the facts. If I you can't make up stuff. It's got to be not that this is making up stuff, but anyway, the flights of fancy and of fantasy are very unlawyer like. So
Yeah.
you're paid to be very grounded. You're paid to not believe anything other than the coldest, hardest facts. So I think maybe, but by
Because like what you
nature,
can prove. Yeah.
what you can prove. And so maybe by my nature, I'm not. But this was a wonderful trip into a world that it's really taught me to keep an open mind because, especially with respect to when I hear stories about the 70s and 80s, now I know that that was a crazy time. So
Oh,
I can't speak
wild.
to any other conspiracies, but I will say when it comes to the 70s and 80s, when I hear somebody say something wild now, I will entertain them that hypothesis because it really was. I mean, studying history is a great way to open your mind to worlds you knew nothing about. Um,
I think that's something I love about my podcast is like a lot of the history I don't think I knew before actually like doing the research. Like there's a lot you can know, but I've done so many different topics. I can't know everything on every single topic. So like I'll give the history behind like whatever topic it is, and then I'll get into the conspiracies, and it's always so interesting. I think that's probably why I like podcasting because I'm like so interested. Every single time I find something, I'm like, "Whoa, like this is crazy." And so I'm like, I gotta share
yeah,
it with somebody. So I started a podcast.
yeah, yeah. I love that about that. How cool to have a job, that you do where it's basically you just have to talk to people who have gone down rabbit holes, and then you get to learn all that history for your job. It's like people would do that for fun, and you've
Right?
managed to find a way to make that part of your life. Um,
Because it is crazy the things that you find and the
yeah,
connections that you can make between different things.
yeah. I bet your mind now, it's like a spider web. You have so many, you've added every episode as like a little link and you
And
can
then I
see
can like
this
link
like,
them together. Yeah.
yeah.
I have you seen that meme? It's from I think Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I've never actually watched the show, but there's the meme and he's got like the string board and he's like going crazy.
Oh yeah.
That's my
Charlie,
life.
one of the guy who's like in the mail room and yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's actually, I remember seeing that episode 10, maybe 10 years
I'm
ago.
like, I'm like
And,
I feel
and
like that's my wall.
yeah, that's your wall. Yeah, exactly. And it was mine too. When I was working on this show, um, I started out, kind of like, okay, here we go. I'm going to show that this is a suicide. Um, and I put a couple of things. My friend George, who's a wonderful kind of like intellectual sparring partner, creative partner of mine, a buddy of mine I went to high school with. We have this wall where we'll just put a picture of like, okay, it's this guy that we're going to study, and then you put, okay, this is what he did. Let's connect him to this murder. Okay, great. And then all of a sudden, as like the weeks and months go on, we're like, oh god, we have a conspiracy like breakdown board. There's like red string. There's
Yeah.
pictures. Like, oh no, we have become those people. Um,
Welcome to my world. This is where we live.
exactly. So that's where we have lived. Um, but it really, I have to say, I really have to plug for this friend of mine, George. It's he, unlike me. I always presume like, if I hear something crazy, as I've told you, I'm like, no, 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 no. There's a rational explanation. My friend George has a way of being like, well, hold on, I don't know. Like, let's look into this. Like, the world's a crazy place. Maybe there's and so he's much more open to me. And so a lot of my story ideas, I'm doing a story. I did a story for the BBC. It's about this whole other crazy thing that came from my friend George, just going down rabbit holes, to
Hmm.
quote your show, and just emerging from that rabbit hole and being like, hey, have you looked into this? And so I like my alter ego is my friend George, who lives in Canada, or I guess now lives in the US.
I think George
Uh,
and I can be best friends.
yeah, you and George can be best friends. Well, we'll have him on the next. We'll have him on another show.
Perfect.
Um, but it really is the two minds. I think we all have two minds. One which
Yes.
believes that there's something happening behind the curtain, and one which is like, well, no, 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 that can't be, because if that's true, then a lot of things I assume to be impossible are possible, and then my whole world collapses. So
I think that's the problem with conspiracy theories is that like if this thing is true, that means that all these things over here could be true. And I don't know if I'm ready to believe in all of that.
yeah, yeah, I agree. I'm
So
certainly too scared. Like, I don't want to. I just did this story. I figured out a few of these things. I need to take a break. That's certainly enough for now.
it's a
Um,
lot. It's
but
definitely a lot.
Yeah. But it was very cool to travel to Italy, to talk to these people, to record them. So now that, I hope your listeners will listen, and these guys and these people will be there forever. They're recorded, and this wonderful, crazy, kind of cruel at times, kind of beautiful at times. The story is on the record. It's like you with your podcast. Like, these things are, you record them and they're there, and I think that's cool. I'm proud of that. Um, as
So how
as a
did you?
lawyer,
Oh,
it's
sorry.
different. You don't get to like create. As a lawyer, it's a job. It's a perfectly fine job, but you rarely get to create something that you produce and that sits there and
Is
is out
there
there in the world.
and
Yeah,
anybody can listen to it at any point. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So how did you come to find Crooked Media? Like how did you come to did you bring your story to them? It was like you guys have to hear this. This is crazy.
Yeah, I had I found this story, and I had a kind of a little seed of an idea, and I drew up drafted a little document and said this is the story that it could be. And I think what some people do, and that's what I did. You kind of trying to shop it around a little bit, and you go to this studio, like, hey, would you guys be interested? You go to this other studio, um, and they were really they were interested. They said, yeah, let's tell the story and take all the time you need. And they were really helpful. They gave me a wonderful team. It just really felt like a dream to be able to have a staff of a couple of people who full time, our job is to basically go down this rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I'll ever experience anything like it. It was kind of like the most useful and creative and fulfilled I've ever felt. Um, and so it was. So thank you to Crooked Media for that cool opportunity, and it was really amazing. It was very, very,
So are you
very
going to go back
fulfilling.
to being a lawyer after this?
Good question. Good question. Well, first of all, so I've always been a lawyer. So even while I was doing this, I keep my law degree. But for now, I've been lucky that other projects are on the horizon. So for now, um, not yet. I still have a couple more things to do before I go back, and I don't know. Maybe I'll never go back. Who knows? Um,
I mean, it's always good to have something there, right? Like it's
yeah,
always good to
totally.
like, I don't know. Podcasting can be really scary because it's so like up and down. You're like, is it gonna be successful or maybe it's not gonna be successful? I mean, everything's so content creation's tricky, I think.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. It's true. And you're right. It's good to have something kind of as kind of a trade to fall back on. And I also think it's helped me. It's given me kind of a mindset. Like I was telling you, maybe it's like a little too skeptical of a mindset, but being a lawyer has helped really kind of shape me into who I am, which is it's made researching and kind of summarizing stuff and explaining. It's helped me do that because I wasn't very good at it just as a teenager or whatever. So that was a boot camp that was helpful to me. It kind of helped shape me. It's made these kind of projects a little easier. So maybe it's not all. I give law a hard time, but it's been helpful. It's made me it's just like
It's
a slightly more adult person than I was before.
well, it's funny that you keep saying that you're like you stay skeptical to like the conspiracy theory because at the end of every single one of my episodes, I tell my listeners to stay skeptical of the narrative that like mainstream, like the everybody else is pushing because I'm like, you never know what's true, what's not true.
Fair
There's
enough.
some crazy things. But if you
Fair
cover
enough.
another conspiracy theory, I would love to hear about it because
Definitely.
this one wasn't supposed to be a conspiracy, right? But here we
No,
are.
no, I did not mean for it at all. In fact, quite the opposite. I was hoping to get this like great scoop of how this weird conspiratorial tale from the 80s was actually just nonsense. And I was going to come in and prove everybody wrong. And instead, it was quite the opposite. It was,
It's really hard when you want it to be not true. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like when you want the conspiracy to be a lie, you're like, no, it has to just be that.
yeah, yeah,
Really,
yeah. We
yeah.
don't want scary things to be true. We want everything to work and everything to be proper and in place. And as we learned when we were kids, I'm sure. And I get it. I get it. I want that. I want to live in that world, right? Where,
That would
you
be
know,
nice. That would
it would
be nice.
be quite nice, you know?
Then I would just have
Um,
a history podcast instead of a conspiracy theory
there you
podcast.
go. You would just have a history. It would just be like, hey, these things happened in the past. They were all fine, and everybody was really good and
And
nice.
everybody, told the truth, and no, everyone died of like totally natural causes and totally
Hmm.
normal. Everything's fine.
Yeah. Everybody died at 100, surrounded by their families.
Right. It was beautiful.
Um,
It was a beautiful, like rainbows and butterflies type of world.
yeah. Yeah. But,
Here
we
we
don't
are.
live in that world, so we need your podcast.
Well, we need your podcast too. I am going to I started to listen a little bit. I didn't have time to finish an entire episode because I was in the car. And
Yeah.
I like, my ride was only so long. So
Yeah.
this is when I binge all my podcasts in the car.
Ooh,
I have a
that's
problem.
no, no.
Sometimes I drive around just to listen to podcasts.
That's a good sign.
Don't tell my husband.
No, no. Secret is safe with me. That's a great sign as
He
a
listens to this.
podcast producer. If it's like the person stayed in her car like an extra 10 minutes just to listen. So, well, hopefully this happens. So you guys can now have three. If you listen today, there's only three. If you listen on Monday, there'll be four episodes.
I think this is coming out next week. Today's Wednesday, so I think it's coming out next week.
Hmm.
So, and I will send you the link too. That way you can share it with whoever. But I will put all the links for. Do you have a social media that you want people to find you at?
Oh no, I don't.
Okay.
I'm terrible. I've
No,
got to
that's
get
okay.
better at that.
I
Just yeah.
understand. But okay, so I will link the podcast. I'll link Apple and Spotify in the show notes. That way people can easily just like click on it. It takes them right
Awesome.
to the podcast. Makes it easier for
Yeah, I
everybody.
appreciate that. I hope they'll like it. I hope it's a journey into the intrigue of the Cold War in the 70s and 80s in a place that you normally wouldn't look, which is Italy and the Vatican.
I'm so excited to listen to everything. Okay.
Amazing.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was great to be on, Danielle. I appreciate it a lot.
Until next week, my friends, stay skeptical and we will see you all then. Hey friends, The Rabbit Hole is an independent podcast with everything you hear done by me, Danny Mercy. I appreciate all of your support. Please rate and review wherever you're listening. If you want to follow us on Instagram, it's at rabbit.holepodcast. And thank you, Zakar Balaha, for our awesome intro.